Hello, I'm William Michael of the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. It's late on April 27th, and I've received over the past couple of weeks, we've been very busy here in the Academy office, and there have been a number of questions coming in from parents of students currently enrolled and prospective parents as well, even some adult students, with some good questions that I've wanted to answer at length. And I would prefer not to do so in writing or go back and forth with emails and things like that. So over the next couple of days, I'm going to try and respond to all of these questions with a bunch of what I expect to be shorter talks on some practical issues with regard to classical Catholic studies. The first of these questions comes from an adult who's studying in the Academy. He writes that he's a Catholic high school theology teacher with a bunch of years of experience. And he writes that he's been enjoying his studies in the Academy, currently working through classical grammar, reasoning, and classical arithmetic. And he writes with the following question. He says, "I'd really like to learn these arts myself and then turn around and teach them to a group of students as a small school for 7th or 8th graders who have not been exposed to the liberal arts. Is this possible? Is it advisable? What concerns would you have for someone who would like to do this?" And secondarily, he asks, in your experience, what would be a fair price to charge? These are great practical questions, and I don't find these practical questions to be annoying or anything like that. These are the kinds of questions we should be asking because we've got real-world work to do, and we've got to get these things sorted out practically. I mean, that's the kind of thing I've had to work on every day as I've worked to restore the classical liberal arts and teach them, funding all of that work myself. It's very practical. I don't just sit around like a philosopher all day long. I've got real-world practical challenges to try and overcome and dilemmas to figure out, and it's these practical discussions that really are the discussions that allow us to actually do these things and not just talk about them like a bunch of conference speakers. So let's get into this question here, and I'll sort of generalize it so it's of interest to more people, but at the same time I'll try to answer it in a way that's helpful in this specific situation and set of circumstances. Again, this is a man who is currently a high school theology teacher in a Catholic school. He's got a bunch of years of experience, so he's not some newbie. And he himself is studying the classical liberal arts with us in the Academy, which is awesome. And what he's concerned about is, is it possible to study these subjects and then turn around and teach them? And, I was asking that same question when I was 25 years old and getting started in private school teaching. I had knowledge of real classical Catholic studies and then this sort of modern junk, fake classical stuff that was being done at the schools that I was working at. And I was constantly asking myself, how can I, get beyond this modern K-12 curriculum and really introduce students to the classical liberal arts, to real classical studies? And I had to figure that out, and it took time. The first and most important thing, though, is a principle that we talk about in Dominican discussions all the time, which is that you can't give what you don't have. You can fake it for a while, but the lack of quality in your teaching, the lack of comfort that you have in discussing the subjects is going to be known and revealed. You can't fake it. You can't go into teaching and not actually know the subject material. That doesn't mean you have to have the whole entire system mastered when you get started. But you've got to realize that if you don't have the content mastered, at least the content that you're teaching, year by year, if you don't have that content mastered, that it's going to be manifested by the discomfort and the clumsiness of your teaching. Aristotle explains that the way that we know that someone actually knows a subject is that they are able to teach it. And the reason why they're able to teach it is because they've already surveyed it, they've already learned the principles, they understand the subject in a systematic way, and so they can go into a classroom or even work with an individual student. And when that student has a question or has a problem, because they've already been through the whole study as a student themselves, they can understand exactly what the student's struggling with. They can diagnose problems that the students are having. They can answer questions on their feet. They can have comfortable, personable discussions about the subject material. They don't have to continue, slavishly following the lesson plans in the teacher manual, or stick to the answer keys and grading rubrics and things like that, like many modern teachers do. So that spirit of, comfort and expertise that students really need to have confidence in their teacher and be able to commit themselves to study, that's just not possible if you don't know the material. You can watch me in these talks. This is not scripted. There's no preparation made. I simply turn the camera on and start talking, and you can see the comfort level that I work with when I talk about these things. Whether it's my walk talks or these recorded talks. I don't have any notes in front of me. There's no preparation. I'm very comfortable talking about these things because I do it, because I've studied them. I've taught for 20 years, and I'm not going to suddenly be caught off guard by some question that I've never heard before or some topic I've never thought of before. I'm very comfortable in these things, and if you appreciate these talks and the freedom with which I can communicate about the topics, that's what I'm talking about. That's what you need to develop, and the only way that you can develop that is by actually doing the study. And there's a lot more that I'd recommend too. It's not just about studying. I'd recommend that you write articles. Make talks yourself and things like that, just so you get experience talking through things, thinking through things, working out your mastery and running into gaps and areas of weakness that you would never realize until you started writing an article or sharing a talk through a YouTube video like this. It's those experiences. For a teacher working in a school, sometimes you can run into those problems in the classroom. A student can ask a question and you say, "Wow, I've never thought of that before, and I don't have an answer prepared for that because that's a question that I never asked for whatever reason." So, gaining that experience and mastery of the subject matter is a non-negotiable. So the very first thing I would say is you've got to commit to study, and not just study, but really ruminate on these things, learn to discuss these things, communicate. If you look at social media or anyone who communicates with me, you'll see me engaged in discussions and arguments and things all the time, all day, every day. I'm checking out what people are posting on Facebook or Twitter, or I respond to most of the comments on YouTube videos I post. And I don't do that because I think it's going to be effective in, converting people to agree with me. I do it because it's good exercise. It's very important as a teacher to engage with questions, write responses, publish responses, think through questions, go through arguments with people and see what results of them. Those arguments help you to identify the real core issues, and that's the kind of stuff that makes a person an expert teacher, and you can only get that with that experience and commitment to that constant, wrestling with the subjects. And most people aren't willing to do that, which is why they don't become good teachers. So the first thing, you've got to study. You've got to make these studies your own. You've got to just soak in them. You've got to talk about them, write on the student forums, chat with me, talk with others, get connected with other adult students, maybe organize adult meetings to talk about these studies. You've really got to immerse yourself, or you're just not going to gain that level of comfort that's necessary to become an effective teacher. You're not going to have the flexibility to do the things that need to be done if you don't gain that level of mastery. So that's my first point that I'd like to make. You really do need to learn these arts yourself. And then turn around and teach them to a group of students. This gets a little tricky because if you're working within an existing school, there are parents paying tuition, and the school is responsible to serve the expectations of those parents who are paying tuition. So, for example, when I was teaching in private schools, I wouldn't bring my own things into courses that were supposed to serve a part of the school's, published curriculum. So if I was asked to teach the SAT prep class, I just taught the SAT prep class. If I was asked to teach a Latin class, I understood that the purpose of that class was simply to fulfill high school foreign language requirements. It was not to turn into, a discussion of classical grammar and get into all of the philosophy of language and things like that. It was a high school foreign language course, and I had to, honor the circumstances and not, introduce studies and topics that would just burden the students, which they didn't need to get into to get their high school credits. That's why I didn't like teaching within the school system. I would ask, my supervisors year by year if I could teach a special course. And they would usually let me do that, and then that special course would be my own gig, and I could do what I want in that course. My most famous course when I was a teacher was a course that I called Christian Rhetoric, and what I did in that course was I gave the kids a quick overview of the art of classical reasoning and the principles of classical rhetoric, and then we spent the entire year just debating and having disputations. I shouldn't say debating because we get these modern ideas of debates which are useless. We had disputations in class every day. And those classes were really amazing. There was nothing like them. And I only did that because I asked for permission in advance to do that in a course. It was an elective for the students. The students were free to choose to take it if they wanted to. It wasn't part of the high school curriculum that they had to study. And even though it was an elective, those classes were packed with kids because they loved it. They loved those classes. And that's also part of what encouraged me to continue pursuing my desire to teach the classical liberal arts, was because I saw when we had classes where we sort of let the classical liberal arts do their thing, it was explosive, and the kids loved it, and the parents loved it, and the other teachers in the school loved the effects of it. So that was part of it. But if you're teaching in a school, it's not for you to take over the curriculum and start changing things up as you're working with the students. So I don't know if you can do that, in a middle school foreign language course, or in a middle school English grammar course, or a middle school mathematics course. I wouldn't advise that because it's not fair for the school. At the same time, what I would suggest is that you consider offering an elective or even organizing a club, if you're interested in that kind of a thing. Again, within the context and limitations of a modern K-12 school. That's what I actually, did. I didn't start a club or anything like that, but I would just offer electives where I would introduce the kids to those studies, and then talk to them, when kids were interested and were asking, what they could do to continue those studies. I could give them some advice as to what they could do in college or in future studies and things like that. But that's a tightrope that you've got to walk, because the school has to honor its stated curriculum and give the parents who are paying the tuition what they actually want. So that's that. I wouldn't recommend trying to bring too much of that into a modern K-12 school. So the first part of that question was, I'd like to learn these arts myself, and I explained that that's really, non-negotiable to even consider this. Then turn around and teach them at a small school, let's say. I wouldn't say within the school, possibly after school, or to offer some kind of tutoring, extracurricular tutoring outside of school, or outside of the school year. Something like that might be possible if parents are interested. And the way that I would present that to the parents, if I was going to do that, is that I would say, look, the most selective colleges, and we're assuming that kids are planning to go to college. This avoid college talk is dumb, especially at the bachelor's degree level. I could see maybe arguing against pursuing graduate studies, but a bachelor's degree in the 21st century is really a high school diploma at this point. But if parents are concerned that students desire to gain admission to a selective school, then what the parents have to understand is what the schools ask for. The more selective colleges and universities, they ask to see that students went above and beyond the basic high school diploma program. They want to see that students voluntarily pursued more rigorous studies, more challenging studies. They went beyond the minimum requirements. And so with tutoring, a student can add a subject to his, high school course of studies, and the tutor can write a letter of recommendation when it's time to apply to college, and simply include information about the courses that were studied and how the student, was interested in studies that went beyond the high school curriculum. So there's definitely a place for that, but I think that it's going to be in a tutoring setting rather than, within, the 8 to 3 school day, which is already packed with all kinds of stuff. So that's what I'd advise there, to consider tutoring. And also how to promote and articulate the benefits of that kind of tutoring. So is this possible? It depends on your circumstances. I was, not to boast, but I was very well respected in the schools I taught in. I had great relationships with my supervisors, and if I asked for permission to do things, I was usually granted permission. So I didn't have much trouble with that. I always had parents who were on board with the stuff that I wanted to do, and students who were eager to get in those classes and study with me. So is it possible? That's more of a personal issue that I think relates to the school community you work in, your relationship with parents and students and supervisors and things like that. So that's a case-by-case issue. Is it advisable? Like I said, I think that tutoring is advisable for students who are enrolled in private schools. Just to give you an example, I had one student whose mother really loved time that I spent with her daughter, who was a high school junior at the time, And, she actually asked me if I would spend time tutoring her daughter outside of school hours. And so, that sort of a relationship with parents and students develops. And, she specifically wanted us to get more into these classical studies, and that her daughter had experienced or gotten a taste of in this disputation course. So those opportunities developed just as a result of those classes going well. But that tutoring opportunity is actually how I ended up starting the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. There were more and more parents interested in things like that in our area. There were more and more parents contacting me for information. And when I started to organize information gatherings for parents who were interested in that, it quickly spread into the homeschool community. And, by the time I knew it, I had, and I've talked about this before, I'd have 50 families showing up to information meetings. And that came through tutoring, which started in private school circles and then spilled into and sort of caught fire in the homeschool community. And I think that the homeschool community is going to grow more and more over time because there's just less and less justification for sending kids to private schools as technology like this continues to develop. So is it advisable? I don't know about within the K-12 system, but certainly as a supplement to it and spilling over into the homeschool community, I think that there's always going to be parents interested in enriching their children's studies, giving them more challenging. But again, let's be frank. It's going to depend on whether you're a good teacher or not. I can say these things with confidence because I know that I'm an effective teacher. I know that I have good relationships with students and with parents, and I'm confident that I can go do this and develop this and offer this, and people will be interested, and the kids will enjoy it, and the parents will be happy. It's the question with teaching is, I have no idea if you're a good teacher or not. I have no idea if people like studying with you. I don't know if parents trust you. I don't know if the kids enjoy studying with you, or they think you're boring or weird, or the parents don't trust you, or, that's just the reality of the business side of tutoring and teaching. You have to be liked by potential clients, or none of this is going to work. So that's an individual thing. I never had a problem with that kind of a thing. So is it possible? I think that's it's certainly possible, generally speaking, but at the individual level, you've got to be good at this stuff. You've got to be an effective tutor that people want to study with. So what concerns would you have for someone who would like to do this? I think I've answered those things. There's got to be demand. It doesn't matter how good a teacher you think you are. Concerns I would have is that you're just not good at it, and that also leads into the next question about price. Price is dependent on demand. It's just simple supply and demand. Like, I know that when I talk to parents about tutoring, that they usually see me as sort of a unicorn in the world, and most of the time they're willing to pay a pretty good amount of money to have me come away from my other work and spend time with their kids. I'm not sitting there, begging for basement rates for tutoring. I try to make classical Catholic studies available as affordably as possible in the academy, but tutoring is a different ballgame because you've only got so much time each week, and that time has to be provided for by the parents of the students you work with. So, what's a fair price? It's totally dependent on how effective you are as a tutor. What kind of demand there is for your time, and so on. So let me just give you some practical advice for how to get started. You've got to prove yourself to get started in tutoring. Nobody cares if you're a high school theology teacher. Nobody cares that you've got 500 years of experience in a modern school. Tutoring is a whole different ballgame. It's much more intense, much more personal, and it's much more expensive, and it's results-based for the parents. They want to see results. So you're going to have to get your foot in the door, and then you're going to have to gain trust with families. And you're not going to, if you walk in there, throwing these high numbers on the table, you're going to get laughed right out of the room. That's just not how it works. So I would say to start with low numbers, because you're probably going to have to learn how to be an effective tutor in these subjects and organize things. And you can't bill your own professional development to students. That's your responsibility. So I would say that when you're getting started with students and tutoring, you should offer very low rates, because these families are doing you a favor. They're helping you to get started. They're giving you the opportunity to have some experience. And that experience, if it works to help you become a better tutor, will make you, more money in the future. But to get started, you can't bill your trial and error student teaching, as it were, to these kids. So I recommend you start with a very low rate, the lowest that you can afford. And you can tell when your prices are right because there will be interest. If your prices are too high, no one's going to be interested. If your prices are too low, then you should get 100 people trying to sign up because they think it's an incredible deal. So the market reveals to you how your prices are. This is just simple business stuff. If I offered myself to tutor for $20 an hour, I'd have 1,000 students signed up. And I can't do that. So if I offered tutoring at $100 an hour, I would still have a couple, but that would be it. There'd be a couple of families that would commit to me no matter what the cost was. And if I charged too little, there'd be so many people applying that it would just be ridiculous. And so you just have to work on adjusting those prices until you find a balance as to what you're going to need and what the market. And I don't mean to talk in mercenary terms here, but I just want to be practical about this from the tutoring side of things. The market determines what you're worth, not you. And if you charge more than you're worth, the parents are going to be unhappy. They're going to say, I'm paying, $50 an hour for you to work with my daughter, and I think that what you're doing stinks, right? She doesn't seem to be learning anything. That's not going to work. And if you do a really wonderful job, they're going to say, I can't believe I'm getting this for only $50 an hour. So, and that's just how it works. So again, what you can charge and things like that, that's all going to depend on how effective you are. So what I'd recommend is you get started very affordably and see if there's any interest. If there's no interest at a low rate, then you can just forget it, right? But I would be willing to get started at a low rate, and I mean, $10 an hour if that allows you to get started. Because again, this is also opportunity for you to learn. So it's sort of like a business investment of your own, and you're sort of sharing the costs with these initial students to get started. If things go well for you, and those parents are very happy with what's going on, and the students are happy, well, what's going to happen is word of mouth advertising is going to start sending a buzz around, and you're going to be getting contacted by other people, and your schedule is going to fill up, and it's going to become very clear that you can't work full time, or even any significant number of hours making $10 or whatever that initial cost is. And you're just going to have to talk to the parents honestly and say, look, I offered my services at this low rate to get things started, but now that things are developing and establishing, I'm going to have to begin charging a more sustainable rate so that I can really establish my work in this tutoring. And my rate starting, on June 1st will be, $25 per month, whatever. And, if there's a number of families willing to pay that, and that serves your goals, and allows you to do it, then great. So you can just see that, there's a general plan for how to get started with that kind of work. But all the details of it are going to depend on, how well you do and how well things go. And, there's no way that I can predict how that's going to go. Sometimes what I do is, I'll get a service started at a low rate that's really below, my level of tutoring. It really doesn't need me to do it, and I'll get it developed, and then I'll pass that work on to someone else who can handle it sufficiently, and free me up to go pursue the higher type work. So again, the business of tutoring, it's a very simple business, but it's the market's going to determine what you can and can't do, and you're going to have to face that reality. And if you're serious about tutoring, you're going to have to accept what the market offers you. And if you're not willing to accept that, then that's it. There's nothing to talk about. And for most people, that's what happens. They have these, honorable ideas, and they talk about these ambitions they have and these goals, but then when they have this puffed up idea of what they're worth, and when they actually try to get started, they start talking crazy numbers for what they're going to charge. Some suckers sign up and then end up miserable and canceling, but most people won't sign up, and then they just say, there's no money to be made there, and they're just impatient and not realistic. You're going to have to get started with humility, prove yourself, gain a reputation, fill your schedule with interested students, and then over time be able to raise your rates and find, that balance between what you need to earn to be able to do that work sustainably and what the market's willing to give you, the tutoring market, what it's willing to give you. So that takes time, and if you're not willing to go through that process, you're just not really serious about tutoring. You're just talking, like a kid talking about, when I grow up, I want to be an astronaut. You've got to be serious about this, and if you're committed and you're principled, and this really is an ambition of yours, well, then you're going to be willing to carry that cross, whatever it takes. So those things take care of themselves. As far as the fair price to charge, like I said, you can look around at average tutoring rates, and that's just nonsense. That's usually teachers exploiting stressed out, anxious parents trying to throw money at problems. Those numbers are ridiculous. You need to look at what. I mean, just think about it. Think what could you afford? What would you be able to afford? Would you be able to afford to pay somebody $30 an hour to work with one of your children on, classical reasoning? If not, then you can't charge that. So it's very simple. If I think about what I'm willing to pay for, let's say for my daughter to go take ballet lessons, I look at those costs and I think about what my daughter gets for the price we pay for her ballet lessons, and I say, man, she's given an amazing opportunity, great instruction from great teachers, all of these things, and it only costs this much per month. How could I possibly charge more than that when my daughter gets so much for the price of her ballet lessons? And you can see that that's what other parents, they know what other things cost, and they're going to be weighing all of their options. They're going to be thinking, well, we can get Thomas jiu-jitsu classes for X amount per month, or we can get, Melissa ballet lessons for X amount a month, or we can get them classical study tutoring for, that's really expensive for that tutoring, when these other opportunities give them so many benefits. So you can see that you're going to have to compete with all of these different options, because parents are limited in their resources. And the parents who are not limited in their resources, who are willing to, you know, just write the check for, you know, whatever time you give their student at whatever rate you ask for, you know, those parents are going to expect real expertise in tutoring. And you're not going to be able to fool those people. So it's sort of a catch-22. You know, if you try to get the students with parents who have the resources to really give you freedom to work with their children, they're also going to have high expectations. And if you don't meet them, you know, that's going to be a bubble that pops very quickly because they're not going to fall for it. So again, you've got to get started, and the market is going to determine what you can and can't do. And if you're not willing to let the market determine, then you're just not serious about this stuff, because this is business, and that's how it works. Look at the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. I charge for enrollment $25 a month, and that includes access to all study materials, records, our LMS, which I work on constantly, assignment grading, support. All of that's included for $25 a month. Why $25 a month? Because I look at what else is available at different prices, and you know, comparing what we offer, as great as I think it is, when I look at other stuff that's available, I think that's a fair rate in relation to, you know, what other things cost families at this time in history. I think about the fact that it's digital, it's online. You know, parents are providing the facilities. Parents are providing the internet access and the devices. They're providing the what are they supposed to pay for? They're already providing everything that the kids need. The stuff that we do offer, it's not like I have to pay for every time a student opens a web page. I'm not sent a bill that I have to pay. You know, I pay a flat monthly fee for website hosting or you know, different services that we use to serve the families, and it doesn't matter whether there are 10 kids or 1,000 kids, so it shouldn't affect the price. The price should be affordable. So that's complicated stuff that you're going to have to work out with experience. But if you're serious about it and willing to go where the market allows you to go, and you're realistic in your expectations, and you're willing to work to impress people and gain their trust and satisfy them, well, then the sky's the limit. You know, that's the problem that I usually face, you know, with tutoring, is I would just fill my schedule in a couple of days, and the problem for me is because I have to manage the whole program, and there's still research to do, and there's lesson publishing to do, and there's assignment grading that only I can do, and you know, people are writing questions like this that only I can answer, and you know, I try to spend a lot of time articulating the goals of the program and explain things to parents. I just don't have a schedule that's free to tutor at this point in time. Maybe in the future I could, or if someone, you know, if someone put money on the table and said, I want you to teach my child, and I could take that money then and offer it for some other people to help me take care of other tasks that need to be done, well, then that would become an issue. So that's really not in my control. But again, like I said, what you can do is going to depend upon 1,000 different factors. What are your expenses? How much money you need to make? How much time do you have? You know, things like that. So there's some general guidance that I could provide, but you know, we can't really go beyond that, because there are variables in your specific situation that are going to determine those things for you. Okay, so again, the question was if I'd like to learn these arts myself, turn around and teach them, you know, how might I do that? What would you recommend? Is it possible? What concerns would you have? What would be a fair price to charge? I think I've answered all those questions, and I'm pretty confident that I've done so based on my real-life experience. And I can't think of anything else that I would like to add to what I've already said at this point. So I hope that's helpful. If there's more that develops as you listen to that, if it leads you into other questions or other practical issues that arise, get in touch with me. Now, let me just say, a couple more things about how you might really do this. What I think the best thing to do, and I know what happens is people come into the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, they see what we're doing here, and they say, oh, I can do that. I'm going to start my own program. I'm going to start my own thing. And, are you really going to start your own thing? I really don't think that many folks appreciate the amount of work we've done in the Academy through the years. I mean, for example, are you going to develop and run your own LMS? Are you going to develop and put together all the content for all of the courses for students to use online, and you're going to make all the assessments and reinvent the whole wheel to do it separately? You've got to respect the fact that in God's providence, I've had 25 years available to me to work, to study, and develop this program and courses. And unless you've got a way where you're going to have time to work on this full, I just don't know how you would ever be able to accomplish anything that was worth all that time, rather than finding a way to work with and through the Classical Liberal Arts Academy to offer tutoring. And so, what I'd recommend is something like find students, have them enroll in our student plan where they pay us $25 a month, and I'll explain how this helps you and them. Enroll in our student plan and then charge separately for actual one-on-one tutoring time, or come up with some way of billing parents where you can give them a single monthly bill to pay, and it includes, the $25 student plan for us and the tutoring payment for you, and have the students that you work with in tutoring enjoy access to all of the stuff that we provide, all the services we provide, support, grading, all that kind of stuff, record keeping. And not have to deal with that on your side, but let us do that work because we already do that work. And then you simply concentrate on being a tutor and helping the students to progress through their studies through our online courses, and you collect your just remuneration for that work between you and the parents. That's what I would recommend as being more realistic. And as time goes on, I would be happy to identify quality tutors that I could put a page together with short bios of different tutors that were available, even for online tutoring, because you've got all of this Zoom tutoring today. And if you become, effective at offering that tutoring, there are families all over the world who might be interested in working with you, and that could be coordinated through the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, really as sort of, official academy tutors or certified academy tutors or whatever. But I think that would be a much more realistic approach than just trying to, start your own thing from scratch and not be able to offer parents a fraction of what, we already offered them. Because if they're digging around online and searching, they're going to find us eventually. And if you're going to set yourself up as a competitor, are you really going to be ready to compete? Because the Academy is pretty ridiculous in terms of what we offer for the price that we offer it at. If you look at the feedback page on our website and see what parents say, you'll see that. You'll see that, they all rave about the cost of the program and how much is available. And, you really want to try to compete with that? I really don't think that's realistic. So I would recommend finding a way to work with us where you can give those students all the benefits of our program and, collect your own payment for time you spend one-on-one actually tutoring the students. That's what I'd recommend. So I think that's all for this topic. That's the first question in this list of questions that I am planning to answer. I hope that's helpful, in the big picture, and practically getting down to the nuts and bolts of this work of tutoring. And if I was going to just close with two things, I would say, number one, you're not going to fool anyone, so you've got to do these studies for real. And secondly, your ability to tutor and earn a living tutoring responsibly is going to depend upon your own personality and skill. So those are things to think about, and you've got to be realistic, and you've got to be willing to work for what the market offers you, because the market is honest and straightforward, and we often exaggerate our own skills and abilities and think more highly of ourselves than we ought, and the market quickly humbles us and says, no, that's not realistic. And you've got to be willing to submit to the market if you want to do that work. So think about those things. If any other questions pop up, let me know. I hope that's helpful. God bless.